fighting in World War I, millions had lost their lives and the world was forever changed. Hi, I am Myra Balog.
And I am Jana Mariel Cornelia.
And welcome to our open house exhibit.
The period before World War II was a time of great economic suffering throughout the world called Great Depression.
Today, we'll be taking a look at the aftermath of the First World War
and the happenings before World War II.
The greatest consequences of the First World War was the massive loss of life. France had lost nearly 1.4 million soldiers and an additional 300,000 civilians in the war. More than 1.8 million Russian soldiers were killed, as well as 1.5 million civilians in total. World War I was responsible for the deaths of over 16 million people. However, numbers relating to the death are still debated. Considered separate but still related to World War I was the effect of the flu pandemic of 1918 had on the world, first seen in North America. It is suspected the flu was brought to Europe by the American forces. This flu was ultimately responsible for the deaths of nearly 50 million people worldwide. Many countries on both sides felt the severe economic consequences of waging a world war. The United Kingdom went from one of the world's largest overseas investors to one of its biggest debtors. Less concrete changes for Britain were also apparent. There was a surge in national pride among some of the Commonwealth nations countries, like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand held important roles in numerous battles throughout the war. Subsequently, they received more diplomatic autonomy in the decade that followed, returning home from the battlefields. Soldiers across the world were greeted with a social landscape. Women had filled the gap in jobs left by the men, serving in the war motivated to help their country. Many women worked distributing coal or making ammunition and also provided a large amount of voluntary work. These new roles helped to change the social status and working lives of women even after World War I was ended. Political lines were drawn in the aftermath of the war. Once powerful German, Russian, Ottoman, and Austro-Hungarian empires were dissolved, with the latter two ceasing to exist altogether. Large part of the former empires were now split up into new countries like Finland, Turkey, and Czechoslovakia. Most importantly for the future of Europe and the world was happening in Germany. A parliamentary system called the Weimar Republic replaced the imperial form of government in 1919. However, the new government was riddled with issues. They were forced to deal with hyperinflation, hostility from other countries, and political extremists within their own country. Many in Germany were still resentful over the Treaty of Versailles, which had forced the country to accept sole responsibility in causing the First World War.
Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party used these strong emotions to their advantage, and Hitler climbed to the position of Chancellor of Germany in 1933. Very quickly, Hitler established a totalitarian regime called the Third Reich and put an end to the Weimar Republic after only 14 years. Only 20 years after the end of World War I, Nazi Germany invaded Poland, and the century's Second World War was underway.
The time before World War II was a time of great economic suffering throughout the world called Great Depression. The Great Depression was the worst economic downturn in the history of the industrialized world, lasting from 1929 to 1939. It began after the stock market crash of October 1929, which sent Wall Street into a panic and wiped out millions of investors. Let's take a glimpse of just some of these events leading up to World War II. Adolf Hitler, on his release from Landesberg prison on December 20, 1924, Hitler had been convicted of treason for his role in an attempted coup in 1923 called the Beer Hall Putsch. A Japanese soldier stands guard over part of the captured Great Wall of China in 1937 during the Second Sino-Japanese War. The Empire of Japan and the Republic of China had been at war intermittently since 1931, but the conflict escalated in 1937. Japanese soldiers involved in street fighting in Shanghai, China in 1937. The Battle of Shanghai lasted from August through November of 1937, eventually involving nearly 1 million troops. In the end, Shanghai fell to the Japanese after over 150,000 casualties combined. Under the banner of the rising sun, Japanese troops are shown passing from the Chinese city of Peiping into the Tartar city through Tiananmen, the main gate leading onward to the palaces in the Forbidden City. Just a stone's throw away is the American embassy, where American residents of Peiping flocked when Sino-Japanese hostilities were at their worst. On February 5, 1938, a Chinese woman surveys the remains of her family, all of whom met death during Japanese occupation of Nanking, allegedly victims of atrocities at the hand of Japanese soldiers. Italian fascist leader Benito Mussolini at the center, with members of the fascist party in Rome, Italy, on October 28, 1922, following their march on Rome. This march was an act of intimidation where thousands of fascist black shirts occupied strategic positions throughout the march of Italy. Following the march, King Emmanuel III asked Mussolini to form a new government, clearing the way toward a dictatorship. 300 fascist insurgents were killed in this explosion in Madrid, Spain, under the five-story Casa Blanca building on March 19, 1938. Government loyalists tunneled 600 yards over a 6-month period to lay the line mine that caused the explosion. About to be engulfed in a gigantic dust cloud is a peaceful little ranch in Boise City, Oklahoma, where the topsoil is being dried and blown away during the years of the Dust Bowls in Central North America. Severe drought, poor farming techniques, and devastating storms rendered the millions of acres of farmland useless. Hitler's invasions of Poland in September 1939 drove Great Britain and France to declare war on Germany, marking the beginning of World War II.